So tonight we have Kate VandenBosch, is Dean of the UW College of Ag and Life Sciences, Agriculture and Life Sciences. And Dr. VandenBosch became Dean of the UW-Madison College of Ag and Life Sciences in March 2012, so she hasn't been here too long. She grew up in the Lower Peninsula of Michigan, and she loved to spend time out of doors, hiking and exploring. In college, she started out as a pre-med, but luckily she saw the light. And she took a biology, no offense to the doctors among us. She took a biology survey course and learned all about those plants and animals she had been so fascinated by when she was a kid. She studied biology and moved from algae to plants to more microscopic interactions in the biological world. Her research has focused on the genetics of plant microbe interactions and nitrogen fixation in legumes, and that's a group that includes several very important agricultural species such as peas and beans. She holds a master's and PhD degrees in botany from the University of Massachusetts. She spent time at both UW-Madison Botany Department and in Great Britain as a postdoctoral associate. Before coming to UW-Madison as the Dean of the College of Ag and Life Sciences, Dean VandenBosch was a faculty member at Texas A&M University for 12 years, and then a professor of plant biology at University of Minnesota in St. Paul. The dean brought two things with her this evening. One is a really nice magazine that we have outside and you can pick up yourself. This is the fall edition of, it's called the Wisconsin Magazines of Life Sciences, and it's full of interesting articles on what many of the faculty in different programs are doing down in Madison. She also brought Babcock ice cream for you all. So at first we thought we were only going to have it at the library, but we've got it here tonight. So we can have some of that. And there's an article in this magazine, in this periodical, about the making of Happy Craniversary is the name of the ice cream. So I think you can figure out what's in it. Okay, so we have, as usual, we have a little trivia question for you. The Wisconsin, when she first got here, Dean VandenBosch wanted to learn more about Wisconsin, about her new state, although she, being from having spent a lot of time in Michigan and Minnesota, it wasn't too foreign to her. But she and her sister took a trip to see some of the sites up here in northern Wisconsin. And they were touring some of the Wisconsin rustic roads, and they were in Price County, where she visited a covered bridge. Anybody know there was a covered bridge in Price County? I did not. So anyway, cool. And a restored logging dam. She was taking a photo, and her sister was telling her to back up a little more, back up, so you can get the whole bridge in view, right? And her sister said, what's that you're standing next to? She realized she was standing next to, all right, this is where you come in, A, a skunk, B, a snapping turtle, C, porcupine, D, snakes. What do you think? Porcupine. Snakes. She was standing among more than a dozen 3 to 4 foot long water snakes sunning themselves on the land right next to her. So, thank you very much, Dean VandenBosch, for visiting us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Susan. By the way, I go by Kate, so not too much formality here. It was fun to hear that story again. Actually, I was supposed to come last December when there was a huge snowfall and freezing rain, and so we had that conversation about that trip a year ago, so it was fun to hear it again. When my husband and I arrived this afternoon, we made a stop at the library to offload the ice cream there, and I hope that they'll enjoy that. And I noticed in the library there was a big plaque that said that the centennial of Minocqua was in 1989, and that immediately resonated with me because my college, the College of Ag and Life Sciences, was also formed in 1889, so just like Minocqua, we're celebrating 125 years this year. And that's how it happens that we came up with Happy Cranniversary as a new flavor this year. So it's especially designed for the anniversary. So what I want to talk to you about this evening is a concept that's dear to all of us at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, called the Wisconsin Idea. Simple words, complex idea. How many of you are familiar with the Wisconsin Idea? About a third. Anybody want to try to put it into words for me? Any volunteers? So bringing the knowledge out to the state, not just being an ivory tower. Yeah, actually the idea was first articulated by the university president, Van Hise, more than 100 years ago, and he said, "I shall never be content until the beneficent influence of the university reaches every home in the state." And oftentimes it's talked about making an impact on the whole of Wisconsin and beyond. Now we go beyond just the state. And so I wanted to talk about some of the things that we do today. What is our concept of the Wisconsin Idea today? And in particular in the Northwoods, but in general. I would say that even before President Van Hise articulated the Wisconsin Idea, the idea about having an impact on life around the state and the nation was embodied in the creation of land-grant universities, which dates back now more than 150 years when Abraham Lincoln signed the Morrill Act in 1862. It amazes me to think back that in the middle of the Civil War, the president could be thinking about creating advanced education for the common people of the country, not the elite, but practical education that would influence everyone. So at UW, on campus, we have several mechanisms to promote the Wisconsin Idea among the people who are there, especially the employees. One is something called the Wisconsin Idea Seminar, where they take, select new faculty and staff and put them on a bus and drive them all around the state and introduce you to a lot of things that you wouldn't find out about just in your normal day-to-day life. And I was fortunate to do that my first year here, and we were at the Menominee Nation, we were at Marionette Marine, seeing how ships were built. We visited a prison. We visited quite a few things, saw how sauerkraut is made, and I learned from Mary at the library that in recent years that they have hosted one of these seminars. We also have a center that promotes citizenship and student learning through service around the state, and also an endowment that fosters public engagement in advancing the Wisconsin Idea. So how are some of the ways that this is manifested? Well, of course, part of the impact that we have on households through the state is through students. That's the most obvious one. And in any given year, among our undergraduate students, we have about 200 or more from Vilas and Oneida counties at any given time. So in the last tally, about 7% of Lakeland high school grads wind up at UW-Madison. And this year, I've gotten to know, this year and last year, one of the Lakeland High grads who I think graduated about 2011, and that's Alan Chen. He's a student in my college, and he's on my student advisory board. And I was really delighted when last month he was awarded with, I think, the most prestigious scholarship in the university, the Bascom Hill Society Award. So if you go, I think it might still be on the webpage. If you go to the webpage, you can see a video of Alan. But there are increasing ways to participate in educational programs electronically, remotely, from massively open online courses, or MOOCs, to distance ed courses, personal enrichment courses, and professional development courses, even more professional masters developing online. UW-Madison also actually has a physical presence here in the Northwoods, and I know that many of you in the room are already quite aware of that because two of those pieces are the Trout Lake Station and the Kemp Station, who are both co-sponsors of this program. But we also have, my college has 2 agricultural farms in Rhinelander with a strong connection to potato growers in the state. So it's at the Rhinelander station that they do early breeding of new potato varieties, and also do the tissue culture that creates seed potatoes for the state's growers. And of course, we have UW Extension offices, agents, and specialists located in Rhinelander, Eagle River, and they partner with our campus extension specialists, so there's a big connection there. So Susan mentioned the Grow magazine that I brought, and this is full of stories of activities that our students and our faculty are involved in, and by chance there are a number of Northwoods stories in this issue that just came out last week. So for example, let me see. So on the front cover, I hope this isn't so much in your consciousness right now. This is a picture of the emerald ash borer and a study about how it's become a problem in the state and how it's creeping northward. There's a great story about wolves. There's a great story about a collaboration with folks on campus with members of the Menominee Nation and the Oneida Nation in a program called POSO, I believe is the way they pronounce it, in developing a science, technology, engineering, and math STEM curriculum that's culturally relevant to young people in First Nations. So there are a lot of stories right here in the magazine. And actually, you know, I always think back to a character in The Importance of Being Earnest who said, I always travel with something good to read. This is a paraphrase. So I never travel without my diary. And so for me, this is what I bring with me for good nighttime reading and things of that sort. I'll give you a couple of other examples of how UW is involved in the Northwoods, and then we'll open it up for questions. I don't want to slight my colleagues who are not in my college, but elsewhere in the university. So the law school has a Great Lakes Indian Law Center, and between 8 and 25 students benefit law students benefit from living and working in tribal settings for up to 8 weeks in the summer, and under the supervision of tribal attorneys, judges, and legislators. And they get involved in projects that come to fruition in this activity. For example, the Ho-Chunk Constitution was drafted in a project involving students in this center. The School of Medicine and Public Health does 2 things that, in particular, that relate to the Northwoods. One is that they bring health profession students from all the majors into Wisconsin communities around the state to explore the culture and the healthcare resources and challenges in any given region of the state, with the idea of promoting those students, once they finish their training, will come and practice in those communities. Also, the School of Medicine and Public Health has a lot of outreach and clinical services around the state. For example, there's a clinical genetics outreach service that helps with diagnosis and management of metabolic and genetic disorders, and they work with clinics in Oneida County. There's a Wisconsin Alzheimer's Institute that works with a clinic in Rhinelander, and a radiation oncology outreach clinic, including one in Antigo, that brings cutting-edge clinical research and patient care to communities that might otherwise lack such resources. And here's a really interesting one, I think, that goes back to the days of the alphabet programs of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, back to the 1930s. And that is a Wisconsin regional art program. Back in the 30s, we actually had, in 40s, we had an artist in residence, was John Stewart Curry. And he not only created art while he was on campus, but he developed a program in engaging with artists around the state. And that's still going on today. 500 artists a year participate. And the statewide winners actually are displayed in the lobby of my building, Agriculture Hall, in homage to the fact that this program began in the college, even though today it's managed by the Division of Continuing Studies. So I get to see these winners every day. Let's see, I think I'll just mention one more from my college that I'm really proud of, and it's a new program, not so long standing as the Artist in Residence, and it's called the Master Meat Crafters Program. So this is on the food side of our house. And this is a partnership with businesses, the state, and other stakeholders to develop a Wisconsin meats brand that could mirror the evolution and development of the artisanal cheese movement that we've also enjoyed over the last decade. And this is run by our extension meat specialist, Jeff Sindelar. And it runs for two years that practitioners who are already in the meat processing or meat processing industry come. And they come from all over the state. They come from big companies and small. And they come for several weekends over this 2-year period. And I'm aware that there are several in the area. The closest one would be one of the master meat crafters was from Triggs Smokehouse in Rhinelander. Is anybody familiar with that institution? So we're now up to the 3rd class of students passing through that. And I've been able to go to some of their events where they present their signature products, and boy, there's some good stuff being produced all around the state. So I guess to sum up, the Wisconsin idea has a rich legacy that goes back beyond that original statement, back to the concept of creating a land-grant university. And we have quite a few examples here in the Northwoods and around the state. It's about generating new knowledge and communicating that knowledge and putting it to work around the state and around the world, about having an impact well beyond the ivory tower. And I think this is going to become increasingly important. We need to talk about it on campus to tell how we are relevant, and we need to keep developing these partnerships. So I think it's really great that I get a chance to talk about this in the context of an established partnership between the university and the community that's working so well. And with that, I'd like to open it up to your questions. So what's... Come around and hold the mic for you. What's on your mind this evening?
My question's regarding the ice cream.
Yes.
How many cows do you actually have down in Madison? Because I don't know where you keep them.
Yeah.
It's a really congested campus, and how much milk does it take from the university cows to make a gallon of ice cream? Thank you.
Oh, wow. I'm not sure I can answer all of those, but I can tell you about the numbers of cows. So we actually have between 80 and 90 cows on campus. We have an on-campus dairy barn that was just renovated, and that project was finished in 2012, I think, and the cows came back to campus. It's a really big challenge to have a functioning dairy barn in a municipality where there's, city water and sewer, but it actually does work. But we have about 600 cows in some other locations around the state. And we do use milk from our own animals, but we also buy in some milk as well. So from the Foremost Farms is a partner, a cooperative group of dairy farmers. So we actually have to purchase in milk as well. We can't just produce enough to make all the ice cream that we make. Yes?
My question is regarding the Triggs meat situation, and I'm wondering, oh, how's that? Good? Okay.
Great.
So I don't know the history of artisanal cheese development in Wisconsin, but I am concerned about humanely raised meat products, and I'm wondering if you are involved in the development of meat from humanely raised animals, so that eaters and producers are humane.
As time goes on, the humane treatment of animals becomes more and more important in the meat industry, whether it is in the conventional meat, you know, the sort of high volume ends up in the supermarket meat, or the more artisanal products, both. We at the vet school, so the veterinary medicine school, are close partners with my college. A number of specialists in animal behavior and animal well-being, is the term. In fact, that same year that I was on the Wisconsin Idea Seminar, one of the assistant professors from my school that was also on the trip was a recent hire in that area in the dairy industry. So it's certainly on our minds, as well as the production aspects. The Master Meat Crafters program is more about once you already have the meat, and it isn't about the production of the animal. It's focused on the food side of the equation.
So this question comes in from one of our live stream viewers.
Okay.
And the question is, what advice would you have for an incoming freshman student from this area going to Madison?
Oh, I hope that we'll have a lot of, continue to have a good stream of students coming from this area. One question that I often get from students that come from smaller communities or their parents is, there are 40,000 plus students there, and I come from a high school that has X number. How am I going to transition? And I fact check this with students all the time to get their answers. And the general answer is, we may be a large community and a very big campus, but we're really a whole series of villages. We have, students have a village around where they reside. They have a community in their major. They have activities that they do outside of their academic interests, and all of those create support communities and communities with shared interests. So I would really encourage students to participate in activities that are meaningful and important to them, and where they can develop a sense of community. We have some things built into the curriculum that help them do that. For example, there's something called a freshman interest group, where students are in a cohort and take 3 classes together. One of them is in their major, one of them is typically something like introductory chemistry, and one is a freshman seminar. So they're with one particular group for a lot of their time. There are also residence halls that are built around a theme. For example, we have a residential community for women in science and engineering. There's one called the Greenhouse, which has 2 meanings there. It's about sustainable living, and they also have a greenhouse on the roof where they raise some of the food that's eaten in the cafeteria there. So there are a lot of ways to develop community, and I would really encourage freshmen to get involved beyond their academics in things that are important to them.
Hello. Hi,
Hi.
my name is Teresa Rose, and I'm the transfer coordinator at Nicolay College. And I just wanted to mention that we have a wonderful partnership with UW-Madison, whereby our students can start in the liberal arts program and declare their intent to participate within 24 credits, and they're guaranteed admission to UW-Madison. And that has been a wonderful opportunity for Northwoods students. So,
Do they get an Associate of Arts degree before they
Yes.
transfer?
Yes, Nicolay College has a liberal arts mission where you can get an Associate of Arts, Associate of Science. So as long as they declare their intent before 24 credits and complete 54 credits at Nicolay College, they're guaranteed admission to UW-Madison. So it's been a wonderful partnership. It started, I would say maybe about 5 years ago, and a lot of our students take advantage of it, and I wish more students would. So
I think that's a terrific program, and actually our son started in a similar way through Madison College, and I know for him, being told, you take these courses, achieve this grade point, you're in, was a really important way to steer him into the program that he wanted to get into.
I agree.
So I'm glad to hear that it's working well for you.
Thanks.
I had a question similar to the one about animals being humanely raised, and that is alternative agriculture. My wife and I have traveled across the Great Plains several times this year, South Dakota and Nebraska, North Dakota last year, and you see huge, huge fields of soybeans and corn, sunflowers, sorghum, and question is, Michael Palin was on Wisconsin Public Radio this afternoon talking about how we can produce these huge numbers of, or huge amounts of bumper crops of these products I just mentioned, but a lot of it is turned into junk food. And I was just wondering what the university might be doing about promoting better use of the foods that are grown, or more local agriculture for local consumption.
We're doing a lot of things, and actually I think I feel fortunate to live in Wisconsin, where we have a very diverse agriculture, the number of types of products that we produce here, and quite a diversity of production systems also. So while you see the big fields of corn and soybeans, there are a lot of other models going on as well. And our applied scientists and extension specialists feel strongly that they need to promote best practices in all the different sectors of our agriculture that we can. In the smaller, more integrated systems, we have a variety of things going on. I'll just mention a couple. We have a center called the Center for Integrated Agricultural Systems that has celebrated its 25th anniversary this year in promoting alternative agriculture and variety of different approaches. And more recently, we have actually made some hires of faculty in the area of local and regional foods. Most notably, a new horticulture professor who's been with us a year so far, who's interested in urban food systems and regional food systems. Actually, I'm going to add one more thing to the list that overlaps. This professor whom I mentioned is Julie Dawson. Julie, when she came to campus, was a real catalyst and wanted to make sure that everything that we're doing is visible. Sometimes people are off in their corners doing certain kinds of work, and the community doesn't hear about it. And she saw a lot of potential to get the word out. So we have plant breeders working on a lot of different crops, and some of them are particularly interested in creating new varieties for the organic market. And so what Julie did is she organized some sessions, open houses at our research station outside of Madison for the public, and especially invited chefs from the local area that feature local foods in their work, so that they could come and taste the new varieties and give feedback on the flavors. So there's a lot of interesting and fun and productive things going on.
One other thing that you might be interested to know is what UW Extension is doing in the area. They're involved in a lot of community gardens being established in the area at schools, and working with USDA's Front to School program, where nutrition classes are taught, and kids are encouraged to try new foods that are grown locally, things like organic apples, zucchini, stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff going on at a very local level that UW Extension office is involved in.
Plus, UW Extension trains the master gardeners, and master gardeners help everybody in the state. One other thing I would mention, not so much for the Northwoods, but in an area where there is a lot of need for greater nutrition, and that is some parts of Milwaukee in the urban areas where there are some food deserts. In developing an urban research station, urban agricultural research station is a goal, but already there's some pretty robust partnerships with Growing Power and other organizations there.
Yes. Okay. Invasive plant species up here are a concern, especially in the lakes. Are there any programs directed towards the eradication of those invasive species, even physical or herbicidal methods to control those plants?
I'm guessing that my colleague here on the stage is better able to answer that than I am. So do you want to take a crack at it?
Just a quick crack at it. I do not know of any research being done at UW on herbicides in lakes. Mostly that's done privately as far as I know. There's quite a bit of research being done by the DNR to assess how effective some of these treatments are, but I don't know of anything going on at the university.
My name is Sharon Riley, and I had a really nice day today down in Wausau at the North Central Technical College on grant writing and partnership building. And one of the big take-home messages was the importance of partnerships for getting grants. And what you were just talking about, it seems as if like there's a lot of opportunities out there, but small organizations may not be able to access those opportunities and partner with the university. I just also have just kind of like a personal comment about not just the Wisconsin idea, but the university. It seems like that it's still, despite the efforts, very Madison-centric, very Madison-focused, with professors going out to the rural areas or other areas around the state. But I have found in Wisconsin there's so much local knowledge at the local level, and it would be nice to see some way to do to me, knowledge and learning is a two-way street. It goes both ways. And there's other places that I've lived, they've had big symposiums where it would bring in local people as well as professors, practitioners, people working on the ground, doing conservation or doing other types of work. So I don't know if there's anything like that in Wisconsin. I know there's little small pockets, little groups that meet, but not a really large one. And what brings to mind is when I lived in Hawaii, there was a Hawaii Conservation Conference that brought in foresters and wildlife biologists, both practitioners, people who work for the government, people who worked at the universities. Great opportunity to really share and exchange knowledge. So I don't know if either Susan or if you know of anything like that or any movement towards doing something similar to that.
So over dinner this evening, I was hearing about the recent program which was called Science in the Northwoods, which has just gone through its third cycle of bringing together researchers, people doing scientific research in this area, and some of them are university associated or other schools and colleges, but also state agencies and so on. It sounds like it was a great success. I don't know if anything that bridges out over many topics, but I know of a lot of examples of focused interactions. One that impacts people living further to the south in the Stevens Point Central Sands area. Ongoing discussions about water usage and pressures on groundwater and impacts of various practices. That certainly involves a lot of local people as well as university and other expertise. Some difficult issues to grapple with, and solving things like that really needs partnership, needs expertise from a lot of different points of view. But since you brought up, partnerships, I think for me, part of the reason to be here tonight is to hear from all of you about the way you would like to see a partnership with the University of Wisconsin work. How should University of Wisconsin be making an impact in your community, in your household? So I'm open to hearing things about that as well.
Dean, I participated in a half a dozen of the Wisconsin Idea seminars up here throughout my lifetime.
Wow.
And I want to tell you that the reaching out with that bus of so many varied professors and assistant professors and deans was extremely positive to the Northwoods. However, I want to point out how important it was for that bus to learn about us.
Yeah.
And the discussions around the table and over cocktails where they get to meet the people of the North and then go back and say, or I would sit next to a physics professor and he would learn something about the deer problem, for instance, and it just expands their knowledge of what's going on around the state. So it really encouraged the Wisconsin Idea Seminar to expand.
Yeah, I would love to see it expand. I know from my own experience that the week started out lighthearted and fun, and then we realized they really are going to work us hard, that we're going to have lectures on the bus and we have homework to read at night. But by the end of the week, I think to a person that participated, it was an extremely moving experience to go out around the state and meet the people of Wisconsin, to understand where our students come from, the contexts that have influenced them, and the issues and hopes of the people of the state. So you're very right that a large part of this is for the impact on those people that are new to the university.
I have a question from our audience at the library this evening. As you know, tick-borne diseases are not only a concern here, but a concern in a lot of places. And so the question is, what can the university do to prevent tick-borne diseases, which are a problem in this area?
We do have a researcher in our Department of Entomology, Susan Paskowitz, who researches ticks and tick-borne diseases. And I'd encourage you to go on to our website and search for what her research is. So she does a lot of quite applied research and has, in addition to understanding the biology of the organisms, she develops recommendations for people to minimize their chance of exposure.
The way that we can get information now or get our questions answered has really changed dramatically over the last couple of decades. I was wondering, if looking ahead, how do you think the Wisconsin Idea will change over time if it's not technological or something else? Do you think it'll change, or do you see that it needs to adapt to something? I'm curious what your vision is or ideas what the future will look like.
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I think that there are many good things about it that we'd want to retain, including the partnerships and collaborations and things that happen face to face, but that we should use technology to its full extent. I think we'll do more and more education with remote delivery of materials, or probably most like a mixture of remote education through the web and then on-campus experiences, probably branching out more to different age groups. So continuing education for professional groups or for career changers. We're already seeing that kind of thing happening. And I think that can have a tremendous impact on the state economically and to individuals as they change careers through their lives, which we know people do these days.
There was a comment on public radio today quoting a state legislator that a couple of different things, that the university wasn't going to get any more money that they requested, and secondly that they should stop teaching and researching, quote, the ancient mating habits of whatever, end quote, and instead focus on teaching and learning that has to do with how to grow the economy. How, maybe tongue-in-cheek, does this indicate the rise and dominance of CALs over letters and science? And secondly, you know, what is your plan to deal with the atmosphere that we sense up at the other end of the street on State Street, and apparently with some of those who have apparently never ever attended college?
Boy, those are some meaty questions. How long have you got? Okay. And the answers will get better the further we go. Let's take the first question about practical learning versus the mating habits of whatever. If we could, and you may know there's I wish I had it on the tip of my tongue. There's a wonderful quote on the front of Bascom Hall about the importance of sifting and winnowing. Meaning the idea that we need to constantly search for truths, and the sifting and winnowing takes us through not just applied knowledge, but to understand life and the world in all of the disciplines that we have. So not everything that we do on campus, and I hope this will always be the case, has an endpoint that we know is going straight to a practical application. In terms of CALS versus LNS, I wouldn't in myself put it in such stark terms of one versus the other. And in fact, in CALS, we go from the complete spectrum from the most basic of life science knowledge through to all kinds of applications in natural resources and agriculture. It's not all on the applied side, although our name kind of sounds that way. We've been, I feel very strongly, having come from a basic science background, that we want to solve the world's problems, but to do that, we don't necessarily have all the tools at any given time to do that. So we have to do basic research and expand our knowledge. And a great example to me over the last 20, 25 years has been the genomics revolution. Through sequencing DNA of such diverse organisms, we now have the parts books for humans and microbes and everything in between. And now have the capability to develop personalized medicine, so good treatments for cancers of individuals from different genetic makeups that we couldn't have done if we hadn't started with the question of, I wonder what would happen if we knew our genome sequence. So I think the healthiest situation is a university where you rigorously pursue basic knowledge and you have in mind the outcomes that you need. What is it that we want to learn about? Where do we want to have an impact? And those two things work together. And that's, to me, one of the most remarkable things about UW-Madison, because we have that spectrum and we do work together. So I think, you know, with the legislature, you always have a new crop of people cycling through. And so it's incumbent upon us to tell this story and to make it real. I don't think we can ever afford to be arrogant and say, well, we're just really good at what we do, so take my word for it. We have to be able to articulate how we help the economy and how we have an impact on the state. And honestly, we don't always do the best job of that. With our current leadership, we have a new system president who's been in his role for less than a year, and our chancellor at UW-Madison has been at it for not quite a year and a half. Both of them are quite dedicated to, shall we say, heal the relationship with the other end of State Street and to work effectively together. And so I'm optimistic about that.
Hi. A lot of CALS undergraduates, they're young, motivated, and passionate, and they want to follow their passions in what they study. But the economic realities when they finish their undergraduate can be harsh, and they may not realize what those realities are at, say, the age of 18 or 19. And I'm wondering if CALS is working to adapt to the reality that students might face when they finish their studies and incorporate that into their advising and what paths they choose.
Well, I think you make some good points there. We get great students at the age of 18 or so, and no matter where they come from, they haven't been exposed to the whole spectrum of opportunities open to them. And they tend to have interest, many more students, and this may have always been true, want to go to med school than can ever go, than there are places for. So what we try to do from the very beginning is to give them a better idea of grand challenges, global grand challenges, and where their passions could lead them in a variety of different ways. Especially, we try to provide opportunities that allow them to integrate knowledge from different areas. So maybe design applications for community planning together with restoration ecology and together with the science of how organisms work. I mean, there are many examples. The idea is that they should have a broad education, that they should learn to work collaboratively with other groups, and I think that they need experiences outside of the classroom, which is something that we are emphasizing a lot, both in our advising and, for example, in our fundraising to support those kind of opportunities. It goes back to the point about career changers. Not everybody will go in the direction that they planned when they were 18. Learning to learn helps you navigate those changes that happen.
Having taught Alan Chen, who was president of a Latin club at the high school and a brilliant Latin student, what is his career plans with this scholarship that he has won?
Well, Alan is planning to go to medical school, and if I'm right, he's a senior this year and is making his applications at this point. What I talked to at my advisory group last week, I asked them what were their experiences as undergraduates that they felt were putting them on the right tracks for, being ready to go out into the next stage of their lives. And I know Alan talked about research opportunities on campus as well as volunteer opportunities. So he is really equipping himself well to be competitive for some of the best programs, I think. We asked, I said, I'm coming up here. Is it okay if I mention this? He says, yes, it's all right. I said, what do you think? Are you going to be coming back to Minocqua and living here someday? And he said, well, he has a lot to do before he's ready to settle, but he can definitely imagine at least having a vacation home here someday.
There's a huge amount of anti-intellectualism in this country. For example, on evolution, on climate change. What can the university do about trying to educate more people about what the research is finding out over the years, and not just a theory like evolution, but how can people learn about these things so that they can actually interpret them, think about their consequences? Thank you.
This group doesn't pull any punches, do they? Also, another meaty question. And I think that this is sometimes not just anti-intellectualism, but it's almost a conflict in worldviews. How do you know what you know? And in science, we go from evidence and testing that evidence and testing theories all the time. Other walks of life don't necessarily do that. When I say faith-based, it's not necessarily a religious faith, but a context that it's a lore that you grow up with. And we need to know, we as scientists need to learn something too, which is how to tell the stories that will resonate with people from whatever walk of life or belief system they come from. And so that means, I think that as scientists, what we want to do reflexively is create charts and graphs and explain things when that isn't necessarily the best way to communicate to the individuals we're trying to reach. So partly it's learning different communication tools using narratives, but it's also we have to learn what are the framing contexts for people from different groups and different areas, from different walks of life. different ethnic groups that influence their own belief systems, so that we can tell those narrative stories in a way that is meaningful to them. So it's not straightforward. Our life science communication department is a group that works a lot on this, the science of science communication. And this fall, our department chair is teaching a course on communication of risk, and the case study that she's picked is irrigation with manure and groundwater contamination, and bringing in people from all different sides of the issue. What an undertaking, and I've been so impressed in what she's been achieving with her students in communicating around such a complex issue. So there's a lot that we can do, but it's not a short path to success, I think.
This is another question from an online viewer. What programs does UW-Madison have to engage tribes and tribal students?
Well, I mentioned one earlier with the law students. Actually, I mentioned two earlier. One was the program with the law students that spend time with tribes and learning from tribal elders and the tribal judicial system about challenges. Another was the interaction with K-12 students and teachers in tribal communities to create STEM curricula. We also have, in fact, here's a good example of somebody you might want to invite for a speaker, a faculty member in our life sciences communication department, Patty Lowe, who has just recently released a book of biographies from each of the 12 nations found in Wisconsin. And she herself is an enrolled member, I have it in my notes, of which tribe that is. Bad River, thank you. Do you know Patty? Yeah. Great. Yeah, and Patty, this is her area of scholarship, but she also works actively to bring in advanced students, graduate students into the university in communication programs. We also have someone who was on the Wisconsin Idea Seminar when I went on it, a linguist who has been working with the Menominee Nation in capturing their language and culture and making that available to the next generation. So I think that I'm not aware of all of the things that are going on, but it has to do with creating curricula, it has to do with science education, it has to do with language and culture. So many interactions are going on. Yeah, while I'm talking, I even thought about something else that came from that same Wisconsin Idea Seminar about making connections between the music program on campus and the Menominee Nation.
Any other questions? I just want ice cream. Do we have any more questions? This is ready? Okay.
Political changes, and it has in the past, and it will in the future, and it will now. So the university will continue, and it's a great university. I'm a graduate up there and of them, and I just feel that no matter what the political environment, the university will persevere. Thank you.
I agree with that.